and they don't want the battle on Verlis's channel because it means that Damon would be in support of Nazism and telling people to kill themselves.
In support of Nazism and telling people to kill themselves.
In support of Nazism and telling people to kill themselves.
Well, if Verlisify sees it, then that makes me a Nazi supporter.
Makes me a Nazi supporter.
Makes me a Nazi supporter.
Which doesn't make any sense because there's absolutely no evidence that I've ever supported Nazis or that I've ever told anyone to kill themselves.
There's absolutely no evidence that I've ever supported Nazis or that I've ever told anyone to kill themselves.
There's absolutely no evidence that I've ever supported Nazis or that I've ever told anyone to kill themselves.
So that's what's happening right here. And if I was Damon, I would actually be worried because it seems like Damon actually respects Nazis.
Respects Nazis?
Respects Nazis?
Which terrifies me.
Which terrifies me.
Which terrifies me.
During these protests, people were carrying Nazi flags, they were carrying white supremacist banners and logos, throwing out Sieg Heils and Nazi salutes. Of course, anybody who knows Verlis and knows how he operates knows that he isn't exactly the biggest fan of the truth or facts. He will say whatever he needs to say to fit his narrative and not actually present any evidence or even examine the facts before he spouts his crap. Once people started pointing out that the protest was violent, that there were Nazis, that there were Nazi flags, that there were Nazi salutes, that most white supremacist groups were there and in force, Verlis decided to start a tu quoque argument where he was saying, well, what about those Black Lives Matter extremists who killed police officers? That was an evil act. Yes, Verlis, you are right. That was an evil act by evil people. Those extremists were evil. But not all Black Lives Matter advocates are evil people. A great number of them peacefully protest and are peaceful in their ideologies and just want equality for everybody. There is no such thing as a non-evil Nazi. There is no such thing as a non-extremist Nazi. If you are a Nazi, you are by definition an extremist. You are part of a hate group that advocates for the extermination of people, of races, of religions, based on the way that they were born. Nothing else matters. The character of a person is unimportant. That is every single Nazi. It is not every single Black Lives Matter advocate. He then decided to take this one step further, and this is the tweet that I tweeted out, and this is kind of where I lost my temper and decided to make this video. And that tweet was a tweet comparing Muslims and Nazis, with the quote, "not all Muslims," talking about not all Muslim terrorists, a dash, and then the left say, okay. And then another quotation, and not all Nazis, and then the dash, and fucking Nazi. He was trying to say that leftists were hypocritical, because they say not all Muslims are evil, not all Muslims are extremists, but then they say, oh, if you say not all Nazis are evil, you're a fucking Nazi. If you are trying to argue that not all Nazis are evil, you are wrong, but not all Muslims are terrorists. Once again, it comes back to that key difference that this man is too ignorant to understand. Not all Muslims are extremists. That's why we can say not all Muslims. All Nazis are extremists. This is a fact. It is an extreme fringe group. All white supremacists are extremists. It is an extreme fringe group. You cannot compare an entire religious group of millions of people to Nazis because it is not the same thing. When somebody called him on this and said, I see you are misinformed about Muslims and Islam in general, his response was a glib, thanks for confirming that you are, saying that somebody else was misinformed about Muslims and Islam by not assuming they are all evil. This has changed Verlis's classification in my eyes from a bit of an arsehole and a problem in our community to a terrible human being. You are a terrible human being if you cannot understand the difference between a Muslim and a Nazi. You are a terrible human being if you try to defend Nazis for their beliefs and their behaviors on Twitter. You are an awful human being if you advocate for the destruction of an entire race, which is what you are doing by saying that Nazis should be allowed to say what they say. Free speech is a thing, and free speech is actually free speech means that you can say whatever you want without expecting legal consequences for what you say. It does not mean that you cannot be ostracized for what you say. It does not mean that you cannot be evil for what you say, and it does not mean that you cannot be a terrible person for the beliefs that you hold. And I believe that Verlis is a terrible person for holding the belief that Nazis are defensible in any way.